various tax matters. And last but not the least is our host, Raghu Marwah. Raghu is the managing partner of RNM and leading the firm today. His expertise is on advising and structuring businesses overseas on behalf of Indian corporate clients, the entry strategy of foreign clients to set up businesses in India, transfer pricing, and overseas taxation matters. I would like to hand over to Raghu to moderate the ensuing session, and I hope everybody finds the panel discussions thought-provoking. Wish you all the best, and we look forward to all participation. Thank you all. Please, Raghu, the takeover.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much, Mr. Marwah, for those kind words and the introduction for everybody. I would like to start by quoting Anita Roddick, who is the founder of Body Shop, who had said that success is more than a good idea. It is timing. So in today's day and age of startups and startup founders who've got great ideas, I would like them to reflect on this one aspect of whether it's the right time. And clearly, thanks to Corona, everybody's got a lot of time on their hands to consider this one point. So with those words, I want to start and hopefully, why startup scaling up, right? Why is it important for startups to scale up, and how to scale up is something which obviously a lot of people will be asking. And if you do a quick Google search on how to scale up, you will probably get over 200 million results in less than 55 seconds. But obviously not all those 200 million results will be applicable, and therefore we are here today to discuss this. And I think the biggest learning and sharing can come from founders, from the VC community and the angel community, and their thoughts and their personal experiences. And that's what today I thought, hosting this webinar on this topic of how to scale up a startup will add value to everybody. Clearly, India has done some things right. We have 52 unicorns out of over 700 unicorns worldwide, which are listed on Wikipedia. And as everybody knows, there are different paths that different founders have taken in that journey to become a unicorn. Some, like the Kamath brothers, have bootstrapped in setting up Zerodha. Others have gone in for funding early. So these are some of the questions which we hope to invite our panelists to answer today, in terms of not only how to scale up, but what is the best way, what is the right time, when to raise funding, and obviously when we go into all these minute points regarding scaling up, the assumption is that you've got your problem solution fit right, and you've got your product market fit right? And clearly, startups have a host of problems that they are solving today, and getting that ideal product market fit is equally important to finding the problem solution fit. I studied a research report some time back, as per which they were analyzing the reasons why startups fail, and ran out of cash was rated at 30%, and pricing cost issues was ranked at 20%. So effectively, your finance man can help you increase by 50% the chance of your startup not failing. So clearly, we are from finance backgrounds, and I have a partial bent of mind towards the finance man's role. But on a lighter note, I thought I'll put that out there, that finance and taking care of your numbers is clearly very important. Warren Buffett had once said that the most important thing to me is figuring out how a big moat there is around the business. And that is, again, one of the things that we would like to delve into today, in terms of how important setting up an economic moat around your business is, whether that's intellectual property, whether that's your brand, your culture, your regulatory or R&D. And obviously having one of these moats is not a pure mantra to success, because the moats are never stable. In a dynamic market environment, the moats are changing constantly, and you need to be on your toes. And then, you also follow different strategies. That's why we are here, because every founder has a different strategy. Some would follow a value chain strategy, like say a Foxconn catering to Apple, and you just plug into their value chain, or a Zomato, solving the problems of the small restaurant owners. Or then you have an architectural strategy, which is like a Facebook or a Google, who's totally making a new segment. And the more and more people that get added on to that architecture, the more powerful that platform becomes. So obviously there are different strategies, and no one strategy fits all. So on that point, I'm going to now request Vikshit, to start off with the first topic, which is the birth of the new ideas, challenges, and opportunities for startups. And obviously, Vikshit, as we heard, you've had a long journey in terms of, you've obviously done some things right, some things wrong. And with that, I wanted to request you to give your tips for emerging businesses and other tech startups about how, how you see the opportunities, and how you can clearly take startups forward to make it into a success. In the past, you've talked about your personal experiences, and we'd love to learn more about that, how you got into procure tech, and how you feel the journey going forward is going to be, not only for you, but for the entire industry. Over to you, Vikshit.
Sure. Yeah. So if you remember, right, like 5-6 years ago, you would have seen a lot of these hardware-based companies in India, like Micromax, Intex, Lava, and Carbon, and these companies, right? You'd have heard all these names. It was known as the milk brand. What China thought is like, why are these guys coming to China, manufacturing it and taking it back to India and selling it? So why don't we manufacture it ourselves and sell it to India? So that's where Oppo, Vivo, Xiaomi, all these various OnePlus Chinese brands came in, and within 5-6 years they wiped out all the hardware companies that were there in India, right? So most of the mobile companies vanished within a span of a few years. So with respect to software, if you're looking at it, we've been in the back office for most of these large organizations like Oracle and Microsoft and IBM and all these companies. What China did with respect to hardware, we have an opportunity with respect to software. We can build in India and sell to the rest of the world. That's one of the first opportunities that we are looking at. And when I started off with Finley, that's one of the opportunities that we looked at. Why don't we build something back in India and sell to the rest of the world, right? So that's going in the B2B direction. So you can pick any space, build something much more competitive, much more better, because of the kind of talent pool that's available in India, right? The number of engineers with respect to software that's available, you can build fantastic products. And there's more and more companies and employees with a lot of knowledge coming out, all these companies like Freshworks, Ola, Oyo, and all these companies. So you can build amazing global products, sell out of India and sell to the rest of the world. So that is one way of looking at it. The other way of looking at it is, our country is so huge. There are 700 million people with mobile smartphones right now, right? So mobile and cloud, and also India Stack, which is an infrastructure that's been provided by the government, can be leveraged to build products for the Indian market. So there are two options: B2B, wherein you build a product in India and sell to the rest of the world for businesses. B2C option is building for these 700 million people who are having smartphones, wherein the government has also provided you with an infrastructure like India Stack to build really interesting softwares like health tech, lending tech, and a bunch of other softwares, right? So the opportunities are dime a dozen. There's a lot of talent available here. You can build global products at the end of the day. So there are two options to go in here. To double click on what we did, kind of a little different when we started with Finley to get to where we were, is we interacted with a lot of investors. Investors have a lot of knowledge with respect to the market, right? They see so many different industries and segments that we, even before we got into building the product, we wanted to understand the market. So we created pitch decks and sent it across to investors, started having conversations with them. And the pitch deck constantly started getting tweaked based on the inputs that the investors gave us. So they gave us connections to a lot of different founders across the network and things like that. Right? So investors and existing entrepreneurs, they've been really helpful in shaping and defining how we started off during the initial days. And that's been one of the success mantra that we've used, always going back to entrepreneurs and investors and seeking their feedback during our journey. Right? So market is huge. There are really smart folks out there. Uh, it's something, it's an incredible moment to, be in India at this point in time.
Thanks so much, Vikshit. I mean, I'm just going to take you back to a comment that you had made earlier, where you had actually refused a client for certain integration works.
Correct.
Because you felt that there wasn't a scalable use case for that work.
True.
So, are there any learnings from that you would like to share? In terms of the essentials for scaling up?
Yeah, so one thing that we see is if you want to build a large business, a process has to be repeatable. If it's not repeatable, it's not worth investing on. And how to find if it's repeatable? As soon as a customer gives you requirements, you go to 20 other customers and ask them, would you pay for this, right? And if there if 20 different customers are not paying for the same feature, then it's not something that you'd like to build for this particular feature. Then you become a service-based company. So if you're building a product out there, you need to see to that everyone is going to make use of it. Only then you can actually have a compounding value over the course of time. So that comes a very important metric, which is in relation to this, which is lifetime value versus cost of acquisition. Always you need to see to that your lifetime value versus the cost of acquisition is more than 3:1. So if you're spending, $1 within $10, you need to earn it back within 2-3 months, right? If that doesn't happen, that's not something you invest on. And also you've got to see whether it's repeatable or not. So these are two very important factors that you need to look at while building a business.
Thanks for that. And another question, Vikshit, is about innovation, right? It's all about, and are there any innovation tools? Maybe there's something called a Waldley map that you had used. So can you share, for other founders out there, what is the kind of innovation tools that will help them? Maybe something like an NPS score if you're a consumer facing. So are there some tools that every person can use to help them improve and help them innovate?
So every department has their own tools that we have within the company, but to get the whole company vision and mission together, we use something known as Waldley maps. What Waldley map does is it gets the sales team and the marketing team and the product team and the customer success team, various teams to speak the same language that the customer wants to hear, right? So Waldley map is one of them. It's a really fantastic book that you can actually get your whole team aligned with. OKR is something that we used within the business, wherein the key objective of the company is being marked as the North Star, and every department gets certain responsibility areas and KPIs with respect to this OKR or the North Star that we want to achieve. So OKR and Waldley map is something that every company needs to get in place, right? And something like an NPS score is at the bottommost layer of an OKR system or a Waldley map system. So you need to define these structures, and then you will get the metrics that you've got to put in place to scale up your company.
All right, Raghu, this is Sid. Could you spell that?
Wardley, Wardley. Wardley.
Thanks.
Yeah.
Thanks, Vikshit. I have one more last question for you in terms of the future of procure tech, in terms of the accounts payable, accounts receivable side. And like we said earlier, about the majority of the 52 unicorns in India have been in the finance space. So I'm not sure whether that's by luck or design, but do you feel that you're on to the next big unicorn story? The procurement tech side, we haven't seen those kind of breakout moments. Is this the right time? We were talking about the timing being perfect or the timing being so important. Do you think that this is the right time, that everybody is sitting at home and due to Corona, you're trying to improve systems and automate systems to enhance or reduce the human interface? Do you think that today is the right time for an AP and an AR kind of automated tool to really take things?
Of interesting. The pandemic hit, we didn't lose any of our customers. That shows the degree to which they really need our system. they were able to go back home and still contribute remotely. So a system like this is very much required for different finance teams to collaborate with each other. So of course the need is that, and the timing. If you look at the timing, right, there are a lot of new digital payment infrastructure that's being provided by the government and innovation that's happening. For example, UPI is a recent innovation that's in the market, or if you're looking at provided by the government. None of these new technologies is used by the finance team to automate their work. And that's why we bring in these new technologies and infrastructure and help the teams, automate a lot of these functions, which otherwise wouldn't have been able to, you wouldn't have been able to, right? So for example, a microfinance company that we work with, they had 150 people doing manual repetitive operations that the APAR team were doing using 150 member team. They just have a 25 member team to do the same thing, and the remaining folks are doing something more smarter right now instead of doing constant data entry work, reconciliation work, and things like that. So the APIs that's been provided out there in the market by the government and various other such bodies like NPCI is helping us to automate a lot of functions with respect to API and AR at this point in time. And right now, check and cash is going out of, it's not being in the picture at all. So the idea that a lot of digital payment is coming into businesses is increasing transparency, governance, compliance, visibility, and things like this for the CFO. So CFOs have to adopt APAR, new age technology to actually enhance the way they function within the company.
Thank you so much for that, Vikshit. I think we learned a lot, and we were going to circle back to you later in the Q&A section. A lot of people may have questions for Vikshit, so hold off on your questions. There may be a poll question which may be coming soon on your screen. Yes, we have that on the screen right now. What, according to you, is the major challenges faced by tech startups? Is this the finance part? Is it the competition? Is it the hiring, getting the right people, or is it the marketing? So everybody can share their response.
Didn't see the option, all of the above.
Yes, absolutely. And we should be able to see the results of the poll questions shortly. Yes, so clearly we've got hiring and finance being on the top of the table. People think that hiring, getting the right people, and getting finance sorted in terms of your cash flows is critical to the success. With that, we're going to move forward to the next topic, which is the accounting and tax issues that one faces in startups. And as we have seen, finance is clearly very important, but for emerging businesses and tech startups, is the accounting or the tax different? What are the nuances, or what are the peculiarities which startup founders have to deal with? With those few questions, I'm going to open it out to Prakash for his comments. Over to you, Prakash.
Thanks, Raghu. Good afternoon, everybody. So just before I catch up on tax and accounting issues for the tech startups, I would like to give a brief introduction on the digital economy. So digital economy or the tech startups have made it possible to conduct business at substantially greater scale and over long distances that was previously possible. The digital economy has given rise to a number of business models, such as e-commerce, maybe Flipkart, Amazon, app stores, Play Store, whatever we have in our mobile, online advertising, cloud computing, maybe SaaS model, whatever these things are there, payment services, high frequency trading, etc. The potential development in this area include Internet of Things, virtual currency. Just now Vikshit guys spoke about these things, that virtual currency has become the new mode of payment, everybody. There is no need for us to take the hard cash over and again. Then we have the advanced robotics, 3D printing, the sharing economy, the increased access to the data. However, unlike traditional businesses, physical presence is not necessary to conduct the business in digital economy. So the digital economy allows multinational companies to break down this and to, as a result, it is not necessary for an MNC now to set up a subsidiary or a branch or appoint an agent to deal with the customers in a country on a regular basis. But there are certain tax challenges in this digital economy. that can be classified into broadly 3 categories. One is the nexus theory, second is the data, third is the characterization. So the nexus theory, generally, there's a challenge. The primary challenge due to increasing the potential of the digital technologies is whether the current rules, the tax rules are appropriate to determine the nexus with the jurisdiction for tax purposes. That is the source-based taxation. Secondly, the major challenge is with respect to the data, how to attribute the value. Whenever the value is created for the intellectual property, how to attribute the value for that thing so that the products are generated from those value. Third is the characterization. The development of new digital products creates uncertainty in relation to characterization of payments made in the context of new business model. Whether it should be treated as royalty, whether it should be treated as fees for technical services, all those issues are ongoing litigations in the tax. Now, coming to the options to address these tax challenges raised by digital economy, there are certain things which have been brought into the digital economy, like a new nexus theory based on the significant digital presence, not the physical presence. It's a digital presence. You can do your business from anywhere. Second is replacing the permanent establishment with the significant presence. Third, creation of a withholding tax on the digital transactions. Fourth is modification to the exemptions from the permanent establishment status. And fifth is the introduction of bandwidth taxes. Now, coming to the Indian approach, how the Indian tax authorities have dealt with this digital transaction. In India, revenue authorities have attempted to tax a website server as a fixed fee. As per OECD, a server can be regarded as a permanent establishment if the tests relating to the core function, fixed location, and place of disposal are satisfied. So just to combat this type of tax issues, we have lately seen in 2016, the introduction of equalization levy, which was introduced in the budget to tax the digital transactions. Apart from that, there has been also an amendment in the section 9 of the Act to bring in the concept of significant economic presence for establishing business connection in the case of non-resident in India. So this is the Indian approach with respect to the digital transactions. Now, it is not like the physical presence is required. You can tax the transaction based on the source model. Now, coming to the actions, what are the actions taken by the other countries? Generally, the European countries have taken some actions to tax the digital transactions. So UK has introduced the diverted profit taxes, imposing taxes on the profits that have been shifted to low or no tax jurisdiction, resulting in reducing the taxable base of the country. In South Africa, also the Davis Commission has recommended for enactment of customer-focused source rule. Apart from that, the France has introduced tax on website operators every time a French internet user clicks on the advertising banner or sponsored link. French has also introduced tax on online and physical distribution of audiovisual content, popularly known as YouTube tax. So these are the actions taken by the various countries to tax the digital transactions because they were left unnoticed by the OECD and UN models. OECD is the Organization for Economic Development Corporation, and the UN models, United Nations model. Now, recently, there is the G7 tax deal. So I'll just give a brief background like why this G7 tax deal has come. There are MNCs, multinational companies like Apple, Amazon, or Google, who have consistently used meticulously knitted webs and complex structures of international subsidiaries incorporated in the low tax jurisdictions and tax havens with multiple routines to minimize their tax incidence by moving their basis of profits from higher tax jurisdiction to lower tax jurisdiction. So the finance ministers of the world's most powerful countries like US, UK, comprising France, Canada, Italy, Japan, has recently reached to a historical consensus on taxing multinational companies at a minimum global tax rate of 15%. Apart from minimum global tax rate of 15%, G7 has decided on how the market countries or countries where the digital multinationals have a user base can tax them. So these are the things which has been taken. Apart from that, there are other issues also, transfer pricing compliances. There are transfer pricing non-compliances because generally when a startup takes a decision to flip their base to foreign countries, there are transfer pricing compliances which are unnoticed. So those issues are there. So once an Indian startup incorporates a holding company outside India, so Indian companies operate like intermediaries and they only pay a part of tax. So the tax authorities in India want to protect the tax base erosion in their local jurisdiction as they expect transfer price to be at arm's length. So they don't want to lose their share of profit. So this is one of the issues where we have to take care. Apart from that, we have the angel tax exemption. So there has been an Indian tax exemptions for the startups. After letting budget 2019, they introduced an angel tax exemption. Angel tax is nothing but whenever the shares are issued over and above the fair market value, the difference between the share price and the fair market value is taxed as in the hands of the shareholders. So, but there are certain exemptions for the startups, but they come along with the restrictions. Those restrictions are they should not further invest in the shares or securities, they should not invest in the lands and all those things. So these are some challenges which are there in the startups. Apart from that, we have the disclosure requirement. Whenever the Indians invest in the foreign startups, there are some disclosure requirements what they need to make in their income tax return. Maybe what is their foreign equity, debt instrument held, or what are the financial interest in their entity. Apart from that, when the startups are coming, there is a cash crunch. So how to come out of this cash crunch? Because in the initial years of operations, there might not be any generation of cash immediately as the startup starts. So they can apply for a lower withholding tax certificate, where the tax authorities will issue a lower withholding tax certificate instead of 10% or 2%, which is the normal tax rate. So these are some of the issues for the digital startups. Okay.
Thank you so much, Prakash, for that. I think some of the concepts you raised and talked about are very deep and I think heavy hitter sort of concepts, and definitely something that requires a detailed examination. So standard disclaimer for everybody out there: don't just follow the advice that Prakash just gave right now and start implementing it without proper careful consideration from your accountant or your advisor. This it can be dangerous to just follow hearsay. But yeah, definitely some very, very important vital points raised by Prakash, which go into some of the finer, minute points regarding the fairness of taxation. I think we're talking about some of the broader aspects today, thanks to Corona, where some of the G7 ministers are saying that, hey, hang on, the rich are getting richer. Are we leading to a fair way of taxing people? And all these large tech giants which are there today, they are getting away with very low tax. So I think some of these things in the times going forward will definitely change. And thanks, Prakash, for bringing all of those to our notice. Next, I'm going to jump quickly forward to a poll question, which should come onto your screen right now. Yes. So why is accounting important for emerging businesses? Is it to bring in more capital? Is it to maintain your healthy cash flow? Is it because compliance is important, or all of the above? Obviously everybody's got their own little bone to pick in terms of compliances are late. Somebody's saying nahi, cash flow. So it'll be interesting to get the views of all the people here, which should come up on your screen shortly. Yeah, so clearly everybody is going for the safest option, which is all of the above. And they're saying, not only the cash flow, but the compliance and all of that is very important. So great. Next, we're moving on to the third topic, which is small businesses, big finance function challenges, right? So when you're handling the finance function from an internal perspective, startups, whether the founder is playing the role of the CFO, or whether you've got a junior accountant in-house who's reporting to the founder, and the founder is trying to, take help from external advisors, or maybe at times, their parents or somebody advising them on the accounts. It can be a challenging role. So with that, I'm going to ask Mr. TK Peer that should the founder be the de facto CFO? And if you feel that he should not be the de facto CFO, what is your advice? What are the kind of learnings that you can share of maybe some other startups and the way they have grown, and how pivotal the role of a finance CFO is in the growth of a startup? Over to you, Mr. Peer.
Thank you, Raghu.
See, basically, an entrepreneur's job is to drive the organization. He is the person behind the organization. He is an expert in his own area. He can be a technocrat or whatever. So his kind of area. He's more concentrated on the area, on planning the business, than executing and all. The finance function is a totally different function. See, an entrepreneur has to produce in a startup. A number of functions are there. He has to have an idea in place. He has to have a team in place. He has to have a business plan, and then funding has to be there. Then what you call the timing, at what time it should be launched, at what time we should go to the market and funds and all. So he has to wear a number of hats, and obviously he cannot do everything all by himself. Generally, what happens? All these startups have a small finance team to start with, because they can't afford professionals at that stage, because it becomes very costly for them. And then that small team, well, that is okay for some time to start till it grows to a few. There are 4, 5, 6 people. They need only accounting to be taken place, and minor accounting, some transaction recording to be done at that place. But when the what you call startup moves further, it has to have much more control over finances. They need a CFO who has a strategic, who has some strategic knowledge of the finance, who's a value driver, who can create value for the organization, and who can do some strategic planning in the long run. Because at that stage, the accountants cannot take you forward. The accountant job is only limited to recording of the transactions. Whereas CFO's role comes in a number of this thing. Like transactions is recording of the transactions at the lower end. He will put in the systems in place to record the transactions, keep a record of that. And then comes on top of that, then the reporting, what has been done, how it's happening, cash flows, other statements, then financial management, so taxation planning, tax planning and all. But the most important part that would be missing at that stage is that strategic planning. That is planning the capital structure of the company in the long term, product strategy, pricing strategy and all that. So that is why the startups need a what you call a person, a CFO who is qualified, who is a strategic expert, who has been in the field for a long time. There are a number of startups who have employed CFOs right from the start. They say that when you are 4 or 5 people, the 5th or 6th person management. He sits with the management to drive the growth of the company. He has to be involved in each and every aspect of the company. He has to look at the business. He has to look at the model. He has to look at the risks involved. He has to look at scalability, all those things. Then most important than fundraising, other factors. That is why the role of CFO is wide encompassing, and it becomes more important. There are a number of organizations where CFOs have grown, CFOs have grown from CFO role to CEO role because they have been associated with the company for a long time. CEO, suppose in case of TCS, Mr. Rajesh Gopinath, he is the CEO of the company. He was a CFO for 2013 to 2018. So similarly, quite a few companies, and most of the companies who were startups at some point in time, like Paytm, Flipkart, Swiggy, Ola, they are big unicorns now. But they grew because they had the what you call technically qualified people right at the start. Because at that stage, if they had thought, okay, let us manage with a very small team only, for us, maybe they would not have been there where they have reached today. So at that cost and all that. So that is why that role of CFO becomes very, very important in even the startups.
Thank you so much for that, Mr. Peer. I think that was very informative, and I'm gonna jump on to one more question. Before we go to the poll, something that I read was we talked about the various type of risks that a startup has at the beginning, right? Those risks can be technology risk, product risk, market risk, competition risk, timing, financing, distribution, marketing, hiring, and the founder himself. And this is something that I heard, from the founder of White Hat Junior, Mr. Karan Bajaj, who I had the good fortune of speaking to some time back. And he had said something very insightful, that as the founder, sometimes the founder is the limiting factor himself, right? That I, as a founder, in that case, he was from a marketing background. He said, I thought marketing was so simple, anybody can do it. But then the growth of the company got limited due to the founder playing the line function as the marketing head, right? So similarly, if a founder is playing the finance head function, that is going to be the weakest link in your chain. And as we know, the chain is only as strong as your weakest link is. So clearly the founder has to find a replacement for himself, whether it's at the end when he has to hand over, or whether it's at the beginning so that he stays away from any line function. And I think this is a very critical aspect that has come out of what Mr. Peters said. So with that, I think there's a poll question on the screen.
Raghu, I'll just say,
Raghu,
I'll just say one thing on that. The biggest issue that we have found is that most people don't know how to hire a finance person. So including this gentleman from White Hat Junior you mentioned, the marketing people definitely don't know how to hire a finance person. And junior recruitment person that they do hire to look for a finance person doesn't know how to hire a finance person. And so as much as we can hire lots of different positions, this particular position is the most difficult. And if you ask Vikshit and you ask Ankur as well, I'll guarantee you, they'll tell you exactly the same thing. It's impossible.
So one of the things we do for all our startups is when we invest in them, we actually create a MIS for them. Because for good or bad, a lot of accounting is historical in nature. It's looking backwards and reporting what has already happened. Whereas the topics that you guys are talking about today is to create more of lead indicators, the problems that can happen 2 months, 3 months. So, and because we are sector agnostic, stage agnostic. So even if you would be surprised, even for Series A, Series B, when we look at the MIS, that's still accounting reporting. That's still just reporting what has already happened. It is not capturing their working capital life cycle. It is not capturing the difference between the leads and the conversions and the pilots into revenues and collections. And so one of the things that we do is we actually work with our startups and create MIS for them, so that we can remotely have at least some understanding of the flow of cash and flow of funds for our startups.
Very insightful. Thank you. Clearly the panel thinks that finance is a big mystery. And I can tell you, even after being 25 years in the job, I agree with them. It is a mystery, and finding a reliable person, B, out of the box thinker, C, what Ankur just talked about, somebody who's good at strategy and future, foretelling the future in terms of how things should happen. It's obviously a lot that one needs to ask from the finance man, and the founder needs to have that kind of gelling so that he can rely upon that finance guy at all times. So clearly there seems to be unanimity amongst the panel members. Can we get the poll question up, please, with that, on that happy note? The poll question talks about who manages the finance in your startup. Is it the bookkeeper? Is it the friends and family? Is it the founder, the co-founder himself? Or do you have a full-time CFO or a chartered accountant who's handling the finance in your startup? It's obviously a very important role. Keen to understand how the rest of the attendees, think that how, so it's obviously a lot to do with the cost benefit analysis also, right? That clearly 62% say founders and co-founders are playing that role.
I'd like to add to this. Initially during the startup, most of the founders are like, let's save some money. Let's not have the finance person. Let's outsource it to a CA person who will just do the bookkeeping work and things like that. You might save 1 lakh, 2 lakh, or maybe 3-4 lakh, right? But the expenses that you will end up paying because of compliance issues and financial related issues over course of time is going to be at least 10x of that. And I've personally seen this happening in a lot of startups. And not just that, when you're going for the next fundraise, right? What would otherwise take 1 week or 2 week due diligence, if at all you have the right finance person within the company, would otherwise take 3 to 4 months. Right? There's a huge difference in having a finance person who's actually going to keep all these things in place for you. So, and looking at this poll, a lot of things are going wrong with a lot of companies, is what I can easily say. Right. So, yeah.
Yes, just to add to Vikshit's point, people generally ignore the law of land actually. So for them, the business comes first and the finance comes second actually. They think that we can manage the finances, we can comply with the laws. Maybe there might be some penalty or whatever the things are there, we'll comply with those laws. But that will cost them a huge thing. There will be huge penalties. And once again, as he told, to get the due diligence, get an external consultant involved, to bring track the things, it will be a huge cost for the company. And by the time they want to raise the funds also, that will not give a gel up to those companies.
Yeah, so unfortunately, most of the founders don't understand. We might be in 2021. The laws are actually a couple of decades old, right? So they've been created a couple of decades back. So it's not as easy as, you know, you make a mistake and then you can upload it and recorrect it. It's not that way. You'll have to spend at least half the time of your startup journey in these compliance or legal related issues or financial issues, if at all you don't do this right initially.
Absolutely, I think very well said, Vikshit. And I think I had this similar experience with a fund. This is now almost a decade back, and the fund manager wanted to take some shortcuts, and it took him the better part of that fund's life to rectify that one small mistake, which I kept on urging him at the formation stage that don't do this, it's not worth it. He said, yeah, we take it on the fly and, you know, we'll see it. Unfortunately, the days and age of taking on the fly are past gone.
Yeah.
Things are now today so streamlined. You don't get an opportunity to really, you know, make management. You know, you can't manage these things. You can't manage these things any longer. It's impossible.
Yeah.
Right.
See, just a small point, as Mr. Vikshit said, what some of the people do, they think, let us cut down the cost, let's employ an accountant and do the job. Like now, look at this COVID, what had happened, all of a sudden it came. You might have a very good accountant. He's good at giving you reports, MIS and all, fine. But he will not be able to tell you that how much you need to cut, what will be the impact of this COVID after 3 months. What is the amount of money you would need to re-energize the business? What impact it will have? How you need to fine-tune your strategy? How you go to the market and all that. That kind of input can come only from a professional. It cannot come from, obviously cannot come from an accountant. That is why if you cut down some cost here, I'll save something in, rather than appointing a CFO, I'll appoint an accountant, but you lose in the long run. So as an entrepreneur, in order to be successful, you need a qualified. I believe in that. You need a qualified person with a strategic experience and some vision to help you that, to take it forward.
Thank you so much. I think with that, we're going to jump to the next section, and which is creating a winning startup business plan and founder's secret sauce. So, Ankur, with your years of experience and of course, being from a finance background, you're a chartered accountant, being an ex-investment banker yourself, what do you think are the 5 key features that a fund manager looks for in a business plan or a business model when you look at a startup?
Thank you, Raghu. So any fund manager, whether it's Siddharth, whether it's me, any one of us, we get hundreds of pitch ideas over in a month or a week, depending upon how fast is the deal flow. See, the challenge is that sometimes I've gone through slides after slides of the deck, and at the end of 50-page deck, I still don't know what the startup is doing. And and I'm just lost that how can if you cannot ever run a business, or how will you ever convince a VC in the next round? So for me, there are few things that I look for, and the sooner you capture in the presentation, the better it is. What problem you're trying to solve? I mean, these are basic questions. You don't even have to you probably Google it and you'll get it, but people still miss it out. What problem you're solving? Who are you solving it for? Will that person pay for it? Right? So, why are you the best person, or at least, how can you, in a best or a new or a unique way, solve that problem? So in a way, to go back to your Warren Buffett comment, what structural moats you are creating around that business, right? And from a business plan point of view, it should be, what I like, the business plans are something which is measurable, relevant, sharp. And how I define that is that, for example, I saw a presentation from a startup which is making a wearable device, and it had a technology, but the technology has not yet been tested, and there is not to say that that technology is good or bad. When I was going through the business plan said that by the end of first year, the product is not ready, by the way, has not been market tested, product tested. They were still, going for their Kickstarter. They hadn't gone for it. First year sale was about 60 crores, and year 2 sales was close to about 700 crores and everything. And when I asked the person, how did you compare your questions, and he said, okay, I looked at how iPhone sales went, and this is how my product will get sold, right? And I applaud the founder for comparing himself with the best in class. But that's where you start thinking that, okay, how what to even understand in the rest of the business plan. So it is very important to explain the problem upfront. And if a business plan has these aspects well covered, and a business plan talks about your go-to-market strategy, talks about your unit economics, and they may not exist. And depending on the stage, we invest from pre-seed, pre-product to Series B, right? So depending on what stage we are investing, some information will be more relevant than the others. And last but not the least, your deck should definitely include a founder's strong profile and how your experience has brought you together to solve the problem you're trying to solve.
Thanks so much, Ankur. That was super good. I think that brings me to the next point. You touched about it earlier about the economic moats. Are there any specific moats that you look for? You can.
Is it just me or Raghu is?
I think he's stuck.
Yeah, stuck.
I think he's asking you what kind of moats you look for.
Right. Okay. As I'll just start with that answer. So I just like to see what moats they are creating, how defensible they are, and for me, it doesn't matter. I'm actually a good part of that is that how will you be able to grow the business, and it doesn't matter you have a patented technology or not. It doesn't matter. It doesn't matter you're the only one. Actually, I'll be very scared if you're the only one trying to solve that problem, because it means that it's not a big enough problem. And there, my concern is that either you don't know it or you're trying to hide, and both of them are not a good indication of a founder and their understanding of the business. So for me, it is more important to understand what mode they are creating, what they think is their strength. It could be the stickiness they are creating in the customer. It could be the tech. It could be their go-to-market strategy. It could be their cost effectiveness. It could be, depending on the kind of business it is, that mode can vary. And it also, depends upon, like, so if we have invested in few deep tech businesses, right? There the moat will be tech, right? But we have also then invested in consumer businesses where it is the product they have created or the marketing strategy they have adopted. So depend now. I think you were asking about economic moat. A lot of times at the stage at which I am investing, what I am looking at is that how much are you looking to raise? And is your expectation realistic as to how long it will last? Because the last thing you want is that you raise money for 12 to 18 months, but in 6 months you're out of cash. And today, Viksha talked about it. Even if somebody likes you, really, really likes you, it can still take 3 to 4 months to close. And so the last thing you want is, having pressure on payroll, losing talent, or, winding down on your aggressive growth strategy or whatever, right? So for us, what is important is that they have thought through the utilization of funds. It's not just a slide. It's not just a pie chart which shows tech, R&D, team, we actually drill down to understand, have they actually thought through their spend?
Thank you so much. That was a really detailed and helpful thing. I think before I let you go, I'm going to ask one last question, which had popped up in our last conversation about, obviously you've invested in terms of the IPV platform has invested in various startups, Fabhead, Sipley, Pencils, Sparda, and so on and so forth. You talked about help board. So could you talk a little bit more about how you try and help your startups in their scaling up journey, which is, different or unique? So that would be my last question to you.
Sure. No, thank you. So, when we started IPV, there were, we have, the two things that we were very focused on was, our investment process. So it's a very deep due diligence focused process, which is led by subject matter experts. So we are probably India's largest CXO platform of investors. And we are not ashamed of utilizing their talent and knowledge. We involve them at every stage of our evaluation process, of our filtering process to evaluate the startups. And the other area that we have created is the strong post-investment support. So what we do is that once we have committed, because once we have transferred our money, because for us, that's very important. For the founders also, it's very important that, money has actually come in and we are actually now on the cap table and we have skin in the game. We actually go back to our founders and we try to understand from them what are the key areas that they will need help on. People forget that, the role of angel investors is not just to ask questions like, like shareholders or yes, founders are answerable to us, but we are angel investors at the stage which we are coming in. They do need our help. They need more than capital, and we look to invest in startups in funds or where startups need more than capital. So we actually go back to the founders, try to understand the areas where they need help, and we match it up against our investors who can provide them that help. We have also created an expert panel, people who are who are resident experts in these respective areas, ranging as wide as just not strategy and distribution, but also things like fundraising and PR also. So for example, we have top PR firms on our platform and so on and so forth. And again, the idea is that a startup, the founders that are coming to you may not actually have the money to hire all of this talent. It may not even be required to have the top talent at every stage, but now they are these investors. These are CXOs. They are drawing crores of salaries in the respective organizations. They are they have a lot of knowledge with them, and now they are invested in you. So if you had to go and hire them, you would have had to pay them a lot of money. But now, not only they're willing to help you, but they are also giving you the money. So, but at the same time, we always tell our founders that in the end, you will lose the most and you will gain the most. So listen to everybody, but take your own independent decisions. We don't force our decisions on our startups.
Thanks for that, Ankur. And like I promised in the beginning, Siddharth, we're ending with you and left the best for last.
Sorry, Raghu, is a bad connection. Could you repeat that? Could you repeat that last bit? Actually, just before you do, I wanted to say something because everyone else was most people are finance people on this call. On the moat topic, we started off our fund saying that, we're going to look for businesses with high gross margin, and that margin will drive that business. And I think over the last 8 or 10 years, we've realized that margins mean very little to us at our stage of investment versus defensibility of the business. And if you can create defensibility of the business, margins will come. But margins in itself do not create defensibility. And so I think there's this fear that, oh my God, my P&L needs to look a certain way at all stages of a company. But it really doesn't, especially when you're going after venture funding or any kind of private equity funding. We're looking at businesses that grow in a certain way and can create that defensibility in a certain way that will eventually give you the margins that you need. And so I think, if you're to choose between a moat and margin, and by moat, I mean having a defense on your, a defensibility to your business plan, that defensibility and the power of that is much more important to us than the margin itself. That's how big a deal I think moats are.
Thank you.
So anyway,
I think so. Let me jump into the first question that I have for you. What are the 5 things that you look for in your founder? I think this also connects with, I think, what you were talking about in the defensibility aspect. You seem to have a lot more patient capital as compared to the typical VC or angel who's looking at a 5 to 7 year exit, and maybe that's why you like to drill down a little bit more in terms of the founder personality and what's down there on the ground in the industry. So what are your top 5 things that you look for in a founder?
So we're not patient capital, unfortunately. We have a 10-year fund, and so maybe more patient than someone who has a 5-year fund. But by no leap of the imagination are we in line, unfortunately, with the growth of a company. So we're investing very early, and we have a 7 to 8 year horizon because we have a 10-year fund, and companies take 18, 20 years to really show true value. So I think we're unfortunately somewhere in the middle there. But what we do have is we have a very small portfolio, and so we're able to spend a lot more time with the founder, and that does bias us in certain ways when we're looking at founders. I was going to start by saying that the biggest mistakes that we've made in saying no to a company is where we really liked the market, but we underestimated the determination of the founder. So we didn't think the founder could do it. And every time we look back, and those are the biggest mistakes we've made. And the biggest successes we've had is exactly the opposite, where we weren't sure about the market, but we were just blown away by the founder. And they found a way to figure it out. And even if their company looked nothing like what we invested in, they've done more for us than anyone else. And so I think the first number one thing that we look for is determination. And you can call that passion, you can call it whatever you want, but it implies that you don't give up. And actually, it implies you don't really give up on your dream. And Raghu, last time we were speaking, you mentioned, in response to me saying determination, you mentioned grit. And I think that's a really good word as well, because I think grit brings determination with purpose. So you're goal oriented and you're determined to reach that goal. So I was going to take credit for that myself, but now you're on this call, so I have to kind of give you credit for that. But I think that's the number one thing. But along with that, the other thing we look for is flexibility. You want to be determined, but you simultaneously want to know that if things aren't going a certain way, that you will move, that you will change. You're not going to be egotistical about it. You're going to want to be able to make decisions based on information in front of you, not based on what you believed that's behind you. And I think it's very difficult to know that someone can do that without spending time with them, which is why I've never understood this concept of people meeting someone in a boardroom in 15 minutes and writing a check for $1 million or $5 million. And I've never, because how can you determine whether this person is going to succeed based on one conversation? But flexibility, I think, is a very big deal. The business plans, and I like that Ankur was explaining on the 50-page, making 50-page business plans. The first page of that business plan for us has to have some over-the-top idea, something that just grabs you, because you see so many of these plans, and that takes imagination. I don't think you're going to create something that's going to be differentiated unless you have a certain imagination. And I think the imagination has to keep coming up, because you're going to face problems. And I think Vikshit was saying this, you're going to face problems all the time. And those problems are not going to be things that you can always find a solution for in Google. You're going to have to come up with this, and that takes a vivid imagination. It takes a massive imagination. You have to be a little cuckoo, which is probably what Vikshit is as well, in order to be able to do what he's done so far. But if you're not, then you're not going to succeed. Vikshit, right? I don't want to. You're a little bit cuckoo, right?
Yeah, should have to be, right? Like, yeah, have to be.
And I think for us, your ability to work with us, because we have a small portfolio, we have we're kind of tied to the hip of our entrepreneurs rather than having 100 portfolio companies, imagining that 30% are going to fail, 50% are going to give their money back, and so not really do that well. Some of them will do a little bit better, give some money back, and then we'll have 1 or 2 out of that 100 that are going to really return our fund and make us money. We only have 7 or 8 companies per fund, and so we have to develop a relationship and in some way a friendship, which is dangerous. Because now all of a sudden, rather than an asset, you have a face, a human being, a name next to you. But it also drives us to think for the best of everyone, not only us. And so I think a friendship for us is really important. And it takes, and a friendship is also something that evolves. And so it's a continuous process. It's not something you sign on a piece of paper. Now we are friends. You owe me 35% of your company. So it's a development. And finally, and Raghu, I tried to think of a different word. I couldn't. I apologize. And your dad's on the thing, and so I'm saying it in front of him also. But we're looking for a little bit of naughtiness. We're looking for someone who's going to, go do something, not because he's a bad person or a good person, but he's going to make sure whatever he needs to get done gets done. And I think, there's a guy, I can't remember who it was, it was talking about this, but it's almost like, when you're in tech, you're hacking something, or a jugaad. We're looking for someone who's going to figure stuff out. And so I think you bring all of those elements together, and at the end of the day, you bring all those elements together, you're still going to need a Mr. Peer to figure stuff out. So all of this isn't going to get you money, but it's a starting point for us to invest. It's a starting point for us to invest.
That's very insightful.
Just to give an example of what Sid was saying with respect to the naughtiness bit, when we wanted to understand the market, we actually started interviewing AP and AR folks. So that was how we understood the market. We started having really good salaries for AP AR folks, and they start coming for interviews, and they start explaining what their work is, and that was the jobs to do. So we have something known as JTBD framework, jobs to be done framework, and we started listing them the jobs to be done framework using these interviews. And so yeah, these are the kind of hacks you got to.
You're a naughty boy.
For all the bad boys out there, I think Sid is your man. I'm going to jump on to the last question, Sid, about your views on whether a founder should fund early or whether he should bootstrap. We've got a poll question on the screen as well, which talks about what, according to you, is the best option for funding your business, whether it's bank of mom and dad, whether it's the angel investors, whether it's the venture capital, or whether it's the crowdfunding. So this is a poll which is going on your right now, and whilst that is, any thoughts, Sid, on bootstrap versus staying it and raising early?
So Raghu, I think this is personality driven, and the kind of company you're trying to build. You take money from me. Actually, you'll take money from me later. But let's say you take money from Ankur. To a large extent, you're on the clock. You take money from us, you're definitely on the clock. We're not in the business of watching you grow over time. Like I said, we have 10 years, and we're not investing in you on day one of our fund. Correct. We're investing over some lifetime, so you don't have really 10 years. So we need to see scale. It's just part of the game. And I think private equity gets a bad name because you're roughing it. You're making companies worse. You're making companies do things that founders don't want to do. I don't disagree, but I don't think that's a negative thing. You've taken money in order to make more money for a lot of people. This is not one single individual, and you have to do it in a limited amount of time. And that scaling, it makes you build a business very differently than perhaps you would have if you hadn't taken money and you've done your option A. I think option A was take money from your mom and dad. If you're going to build a business and you want to just build it and slowly, grow it and make some dividend out of it, I would take money from your mom and dad. And I would slowly build it up. Sometimes you don't need that much money. You don't realize you don't need. Mr. Marwah was mentioning Zerodha and how they didn't. We met with them. One of my partners was trying desperately to put money in their company about 3-4 years ago. They just threw him out. Fast without money. The other problem is you take money, you're going to have to take more money. There's no stopping once you take money. And eventually you have to find liquidity. And it might not be ideal for you. So the rules of the games change. And so I don't think it's a question of a certain set of people take money, certain set of people don't take money. You have to decide what's important to you. I remember the Card Deco team didn't raise money for a long time, then raised money, but a much larger sum of money when they decided that they could control their company and their destiny. Very interesting. At the same measure, so many companies today that are doing this Thrasio model, I'm sure you've seen, where you raise a bunch of money and put them in different, raise 50 million, Cred raised, X amount in the first round. So you have companies doing different strategies. All will be successful, I'm sure, but it's also mentality. And you have to decide what's important and what's not. But I would suggest that if you decide to come on the route of taking money from someone other than your mom and dad, that you should know that you are now on a timetable. There is a timetable, and it's not probably your own timetable. I think that's critical to know.
Super, all super answers. Before I let you go, would you like to share some insights of, obviously Lightbox Ventures has invested in a whole bunch of very successful startups, Imbibe, Dunzo, Rebel Foods, and City Flow, and so forth. Are there any thoughts or learnings or experiences that you've had, interacting with those founders in terms of their struggle to scale up, and if you would like to share some of those learnings so other people can try and not make those same mistakes? Is there something that comes to mind that you'd like to share?
I think everyone, struggles to scale. And it's like one of those with those movie stars that say that became an overnight sensation. It took me 20 years to become an overnight sensation. The companies that you see, like I was listening to Baiju. It was a little group discussion. He was saying, how many years he spent teaching to figure out what he wanted. So, these are long paths. The founders of Flipkart started 2006, 2000, long paths of, trying to figure stuff out where you won't find money, where no one believes what you're doing or how you're doing it. I think any business, including our own, where we have to go out and raise money in order to put money in startups, you get more no's and idiot responses, like "you moron," then you get, "oh wow, you're such an amazing person." And I think the idea being that you have to know that everyone goes through that. And the problem that we face in India, quite honestly, is that we have this ridiculously overbearing media that keeps putting up this stuff about how this company is valued, and oh my God, this company, and they start creating this unnecessary rat race that you think that you won't fall into, but you do. And you start saying, well, why those guys are raising, why can't I? Something's wrong with me. Because it seems like everybody is raising and I'm not. Everyone is a unicorn and I'm not. Everyone is really successful and Fortune's 40 under 40, but I'm not. And I think that's the one thing that you have to look out for. You have to kind of ignore the world. You have to and just keep going your path. Especially when you're growing in a certain way and you decide, oh my God, this guy's growing even faster than me. I got to do something. Let me do something that I wasn't planning on doing or hadn't thought through. Oh my God, we've seen that. And everybody does it. It's not like, I'm giving someone advice so they don't do it. Everybody, because you learn, you do it, then you learn, like, oh God, I can't believe I did that. And I won't do it again. And so anyway, I think that's one big lesson that we've seen.
Great thoughts. I think these are all great chats. With that, I'm going to open the floor to the Q&A. I believe there are some questions already on. So I'm going to fire away from the top. Mr. Chaitanya Iyengar asked this question: what does the panel think about the need for more purpose-driven startups wanting to solve meaningful problems and challenges and make an impact, and not just focus on maximizing profits and wanting to quickly scale up and exit the business? Any volunteers as to who wants to take this up in terms of, I think the question is more about impact investing versus just following the more traditional money makes more money kind of a question. Anybody wants to volunteer to answer that amongst the panel?
And just very quickly, I think that, it's just that the news doesn't put them up. And so you don't hear about it, Chaitanya, but there are a lot. And I think they're coming up more and more in across from FMCG to agri-tech to, all kinds of poverty-stricken towns and villages. So
that's been invested in just nuclear fusion technology in the last 3-4 years. It's happening, as Sid was saying. There's not a lot of noise around it at the end of the day.
What is important to understand is that who you're raising money from, and why. There are impact funds who will invest in new age startup, who will invest in climate tech, who will invest in all sort of, which can have a lot of meaningful benefits. But at the end of the day, they are funds. They have also taken money from their LPs. They'll have to return them at the end of the fund cycle, and so they are also looking for growth and chase. At the same time, so it depends on who you're raising funds from. At the same time, you can raise grants, and you can, there are a lot of foundations out there which are willing to give grants to, to businesses which are doing something really meaningful, but they can't be all about profitability because of the kind of business they are. So if you are very clear about the purpose of what you're trying to do, then there are different kind of investors who can support you in your journey.
Thank you so much to the panel. The next question, again from Chaitanya Iyengar, is: what are your views on new models in venture capital, open-ended, evergreen, capital structures, rolling funds? So are there other ways or other models which you see are successful and going forward are going to play a larger or more important role? Over to the panel. Anybody wants to volunteer answering?
So I think they're absolutely going to be newer models. And I think the people that are going to come up with these models are not going to be necessarily venture capital funds. They're going to be family offices in India. I think that as much as there is money in venture capital, it diminishes in So, whoops, sorry. Zoom didn't like my answer. So I think I think there are a lot. I think corporate venture capital is going to become a very big deal in India. And I think to a large extent, that's going to drive a lot of and so there's a lot more that will happen, and will happen in the next decade or so.
Yeah, and there might be also the IPO, which the startups might think to issue shares to be open.
Sorry, guys, I think my apologies. I think that there were some technology challenges, and yeah, one lives and encounters this. So I'm just going to very quickly ask the last question before we fold up, which is from an anonymous attendee. Any thoughts about the future of startups in the GIFT City, IFSC? What would Indian startups or investors in Indian startup angel VC investors look for in the GIFT City? So any thoughts on anybody who is thinking about GIFT City as a realistic option, or does everybody think that if I have to move places, I might as well just move to Singapore or London as a destination rather than moving places to GIFT City? Any thoughts of anybody on the realistic possibilities of that becoming an important hub?
As a fund, we may consider, because there are some benefits for funds to be open there, because you don't have to pay taxes on the management fee you charge, from the funds that come in from your non-Indian entities. So that could be a very big differentiator. But as a startup, one of the biggest challenges you're facing today in India is you can't accept money coming from China or Chinese LPs, and that problem I don't think still gets solved if you move to GIFT City. So a lot of our startups are facing this real challenge where the next round of investors are ready, willing to transfer money, but the approval is not just coming. And so I don't know how much of a difference it will make, but yeah, I mean, it's a good initiative. At the end of the day, it's about ease of doing business, whether you're a startup or a fund. There is demand on both sides. So, any initiative that makes it easier for businesses, for funds to bring in capital, invest capital, and then repatriate the capital back to their investors. And any way that businesses and fund companies can raise money from, legitimate investors, irrespective of their nationalities, all of those moves will be welcome.
Talent also. You don't have, I mean, where are you going to, I think you have to be where the talent is. Talent.
Thank you so much for joining us today. With that, we're going to bring the session to an end. Thank you, everybody. Namaskar. I think this is the handshake replacement. So yeah, and adieu to everybody. Thank you for everybody joining us and being patient.